Well, hello, that's me again. Today is June 14th. It's Wednesday, I believe. And we will go a little bit geopolitical today, but before we go, I need to explain some things which have been floating around for a while. I'm not going to name the person who originated this thing. I know who he is. I know he's a shyster from the geopolitics, but there was this almost panic mode perpetuated for the last, I would say, 3-4 weeks with this air defender exercises by NATO, which they present as the largest ever and all that, and that it would be used as the pretext or feint, so to speak, to start actual war on Russia. And we will start with this. Here is the this is Luftwaffe actually, who posted on the tweet this air defender exercise. Look at this. Oh yeah, Team Luftwaffe. We have 250 almost, aircraft, whatever, combination of combat aircraft and transport and bombers, and we have air powers. Let's do it, so, and here we are. Now, and of course, based on that, and it's already in the third day, I believe, this exercise that, oh my God, they're gonna use it at, and then suddenly attack Russia. Let me explain. Those people who say those things, they have no clue about modern radar and modern ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, because no matter what you do, you cannot fool the number with anybody, especially Russia, with the number of your planes which participate. Some people say, oh no, it's not 250, it could be 300. Okay, that makes no difference whatsoever. And again, for people to understand that how ridiculous all this is, I'll give you an example. In 2017, actually this was the time I was finishing my first book, which, by the way, in which I was writing about the complete lack of understanding of the modern war on the West part, Rand and its big honcho, Mr. Rachmanik, who is the guy who specializes in the air operations. They published this basically concept, so to speak, in which they discussed how many planes they need to defeat Russia in Ukraine if the war breaks out there. And that's why I love internet. It, maintains and saves so many things which are important. In 2017, I responded to it. As you can see yourself, it was December 28th and I wrote about it as just, Rand's wet dream, where I continued my good old thesis, developing my good old thesis that they have no clue actually what they are dealing with, which actually is today proven unequivocally by the, absolutely huge amount of the evidence of that. But here it is. I wrote about this Rand's wet dreams and about the U.S. military capabilities and forces for a dangerous world, rethinking the U.S. approach to force planning, and especially in terms of how they want to fight Russia. And Rand published this table, as you can see yourself, summary of force levels employed across 5 scenarios, and one of the scenarios, as you can see yourself, was how to beat Russia. And as you can see yourself, they place it as a major conflict, one of the calculations, and they say that you need 28 fighter squadrons, you need 7 squadrons of heavy bombers, ISR orbit high and 5, and on and on and on and on. And so when you count all that, roughly at that time, Achmanik and his team in Rand, this so-called think tank, they arrived to the fact that, oh yeah, we probably need about 672, 680 fighter combat aircraft. We need another 84 heavy bombers and things of this nature. And it was like, so yeah, you have to have, 750, 800 planes just to, attack and destroy Russia in Ukraine or against Russia. It was, of course, wishful thinking and wet dreams, as you might expect. And then in 2019, suddenly Mr. Achmanik changes his tune. I spoke about this. Those who follow me, they should remember it. And then Achmanik admits And this was actually 2019 that the US military gets its ass handed to it in World War III simulation. And we lose a lot of people, he says, we lose a lot of equipment, we usually fail to achieve our objectives of preventing aggression by the adversary, RAND analyst David H. Manik told the security conference on Thursday. You can find the video of the security conference, and in our games when we fight Russia and China, blue gets its ass handed to it. So yeah, there is nothing new about this. I warned about it non-stop for the last 9 years, that basically those people, they do not understand what they are dealing with. Now we have the situation which is unfolding in front of our eyes, and then suddenly we have people, I don't know why they do this. They need what? I don't know, feel themselves important, or they have complex of inferiority they need to overcome. But anybody who tries to plan combat action against Russia with 250 mixed planes. I mean, I don't know how many combat fighter planes are there against Russian air defense. I mean, they really need to have their head checked by psychiatrists, because this is not only crazy altogether, it is also the fact that they do not understand what modern warfare is and what modern air operations are, let alone they don't understand what Russian air defense is. Not to mention the fact that Russian Air Force is huge, and it already deploys up to 1,000 combat aircraft. And and the Russian military-industrial complex only accelerates in terms of cranking out, all those combat aircraft, tanks, what have you. And for people who come up with this baloney, it's just the demonstration. This whole exercise is merely a demonstration and desire to show to Russia that, yeah, we matter, NATO matters. You see, we have 250 combat aircraft. Well, Russia has actually thousands of the state-of-the-art air defense complexes, which would shoot down those aircraft if they ever try to penetrate, even air defense zone with all kinds of stupid intentions. And again, for those people who still do not understand what I'm talking about, for example, container over-the-horizon radar stations in Russia, one which is in Mordovia, it can see 3,000 kilometers, and as the chief designer of these stations actually stated openly for the record, that we can see their aircraft on the runways in Netherlands or Belgium, and we know how many of them they are. So there you go, make your own conclusions, and this is just yet another attempt to intimidate Russia and show, that NATO matters. It doesn't. But here we go to the other thing, which actually brings us to the C-trap a little bit, and I need to go over this C-trap, because as you can see yourself, the Russian Defense Ministry today reports, this is on the 14th of June, I'm not gonna go over it, we need to only follow the dynamics of the events, and as you can see yourself, it's underlined with the red line. On the South Donetsk and Zaporozhye operational axis, losses of the Ukrainian forces are again more than 800 people, 20 tanks are blown out, and BMPs, all kinds of things. So then you have another pure Donetsk axis. We have more than 205 people annihilated or killed, what have you, so casualties. And if you count it all together, you have another, say, let's see, okay, you have 60, 110, 140, so we have 1,000. So yeah, well, around 1,200 people just wiped out of their battle order for Ukrainian forces. And as I already stated, many people still do not understand what is happening with their armor, which was supplied by NATO. It is being annihilated in industrial quantities, and there are of course, a lot of confusion now, for example, in Germany, which for some reason thinks that it's a great military power and producer of great military equipment. It is not. It's not even in the same league as Russia. And when they think that, oh my God, the Russians are really good at killing our tanks, so, and you have this, Stern, which is essentially the tabloid, German tabloid, but even they have to say, oh my God, mines, buggies, helicopters, they create the horrible situation for their tanks. I don't know who actually came up with this. It is like those statements about that Leopard 2 is the greatest tank, or like Abrams, oh my God, Abrams can make all the difference. No, it cannot make any difference whatsoever. Even if 100 of them is delivered there, it will be blown up or burned anyway, the same way as any other, NATO equipment is burning. And fact is, Russian tanks turned out to be, and I'm talking about not only Russian tanks in like Russian tanks, but I'm talking about the Soviet even tanks appear to be no less effective than all kinds of the Western equipment. The fact is, they are better suited for the modern combat, the modern battlefield. And when you look at those people, say like, oh my gosh, they now talk about this in tabloids, and you begin to understand that this is actually a metaphysical issue. It is not just the issue of balance of power. It is not just the issue of whose equipment is better. We already know whose equipment is better and whose the concept, fighting doctrine, tactics, operational art and strategy are better. And I read my lips. And again, you can quote me. You can refer me to me or refer me, if you wish, reference me when you need to say to somebody and they will say, oh yeah, we're so good. No, you're not that good. And that's the whole point. And the point is that the modern NATO, United States, they don't have even fighting doctrine which is adequate for the modern warfare. And you can quote me again, as I already stated, if somebody says, oh, how do you know this? Well, I have basically the case to prove it. And even Washington Post, this terrorist supporting, scumbags who, I don't know, they call it CIA outlet, whatever they are. Even they say, on front lines of Ukraine, counteroffensive soldiers pay heavy price. The men of Ukraine's 37th Brigade were freshly trained and armed with Western-supplied weapons, tasked with an initial push through Russian-occupied territory in the early days of long-awaited counteroffensive. And guess what? They would pay a heavy price. I cannot emphasize enough. Unlike most American or Western journalists who have no clue, they are highly uncultured, highly uneducated people who are merely just ideologues and propagandists. I actually have experience on writing about the plans of the combat training for the quite large units, and from the ship to the whole brigade, depending on the type of the specialty. So, and when you begin to hear this Western NATO training, NATO this and that, you know what? Look up, I already demonstrated to you, look up all those field manuals and you will see yourself. Again, what's so special about this training? Especially when you try to train the army or armed forces, which are thrown into the meat grinder and they can do nothing. And again, this famous photo now of all those destroyed Bradleys and Leopard tanks, I mean, there are many others. And it just, go on the BitChute or whatever other sources of the independent information. You'll find so many of those things. The columns of the Ukrainian armor burned and destroyed. And again, how can you explain to this? I already stated, my good friend, who is much older and who is, by the way, was professional tanker, and he's actually a pretty famous man in the United States. I'm not going to disclose his name. He said, you know what, yeah, it's a Patton syndrome. They still think that they can use, as he said, the armed forces as heavy cavalry. It doesn't work like this. You cannot explain it to them. They don't understand. They never faced any kind of the serious enemy in their history. And there you go. Then suddenly you have to face all those little funny Mi-28s and Ka-52s and Su-25s and what have you. And again, there is no armor which is invented which can sustain Cornet ATGM, let alone Hermes. There's nothing like this in the Western arsenal. They cannot develop it because evidently there's some issue also with engineers, and that when we discuss it, we begin to go over the whole systemic collapse of the things which range from politicians to media to engineers to what have you. And then there you go, you have what we have today. And if that wasn't bad enough, of course, you also have to go, and I want to address actually immediately the issue of some people who complain, oh, why do you do this? You sound like a broken record. Yes, I am. And I will continue to do this. I will continue to expose the so-called expert community. There are no experts in the expert community in the United States. Even the military, which begins to parade itself as a bunch of I don't know, if somebody thinks that Mr. Petraeus or Mr. King or whoever are experts in warfare, they are not. They have no idea what modern warfare of scale is. They never experienced it. They never studied it, because how can you study something which is completely mythology? As I already stated, anybody who thinks that Patton was a great tank general, they have no clue what they're talking about. And here we have another clown from no less Foreign Affairs who says that, oh yeah, you know, Ukraine winnable war. Why the West should help Kyiv retake all of its territory? And he, actually, this guy, Gideon Rose, who is neocon's neocon, I will give you his CV. And again, this is Foreign Affairs. It's lowering itself into the complete pseudo-intellectual sewer. And most of people there in this Council on Foreign Relations, when you look at that, yeah, that's Kissinger type level. That means they have no clue what they're talking about. And here the guy, he's a propagandist and ignoramus. In February 22, Russia invaded Ukraine in an attempt to conquer the country and erase the independence it had gained after the collapse of the Soviet Union 3 decades earlier. Of course, he lies immediately, because obviously Russia didn't want to invade it and it was forced to do this. But when you look at those people and you look at this Gideon Rose CV, look who the guy is. My gosh, he's a former editor of Foreign Affairs and a member on the Council on Foreign Relations. Rose was born to a Jewish family, the son of John and Daniel Rose, a real estate developer. Surprise. In 1985, he earned BA in Classics from Yale University, where he was a member of Scroll and Key, whatever the hell that is. He received his PhD in government from Harvard University in 1994. In other words, the guy has zero background in anything. And again, anybody who thinks that whatever PhD in government is, let me put it this way. This is the program for people with the average IQ who just read books. Basically, that's it. You know, you don't need to have PhD in government, and especially when you look the way the United States is being governed, or rather lack thereof governance, and you can say yourself that basically those degrees are absolutely useless, and it's soft degrees for good old boys to have some kind of credentials, but they have no clue what they're talking about. And yet, guess what? This is the type of American elites. They are dumb as stumps. And here, that's what brings us to other thing. And this is very important, because guess what? Macron asks no less to Mr. Ramaphosa, who is the president of the South African Republic, that French president would be the first Western leader to sit on the gathering of emerging economies. That means he asks for the invitation to BRICS summit. Now, the question is, of course, why the hell this guy of the country, which is actually geopolitically a pipsqueak and is a lapdog of the United States and will do, you know, as the United States tell them to do, why does he try to get to the BRICS summit? What's in there for France? French elected this guy. This guy supports Ukraine. He wants as many Russians killed as possible. He is definitely Russophobic in the extreme. And then suddenly he wants to be invited to the organization where Russia is the key, the founding member, and is the pivotal, and it's the most important country in defense capabilities of the realm, not to speak of the fact that Russian economy dwarfs that of France, with some few French sectors where they do excel, which is of course some in aerospace and some issues of the shipbuilding and a few others, but primarily which is still service economy. And here it is. So Russian Minister of the Foreign Affairs immediately asks for explanation. As today, Mrs. Zakharova, she said that Minister of the Foreign Affairs of Russia called on Paris to explain the desire of Macron to visit summit of BRICS. And she stated, when speaking to Radio Sputnik today, that, well, yet another time they want to establish some kind of the contact to show that Paris is active. Or maybe it's some kind of the Trojan horse. We can sit here and basically discuss this situation with Macron whatever we want. But the point is that we have to understand that as for people who love the conspiracy theaters, I will remind you one phrase which is documented by Joseph Stalin when he was asked about this, cooperation from Pope, in order to kind of decide the issue of settle the World War II. And of course, he was told that, yeah, he is very, important and, person in Catholic world and in Western civilization. He asked the simple question: how many divisions does the Pope have? And that explains it pretty much same thing about France. Militarily, France, except for its own very insignificant, but still it's important, nuclear deterrent, militarily it's a pipsqueak. It got its ass handed to it in the Sahel with the help of Russian mercenaries. And when you look at this, and considering the fact that France will be removed from Africa and will be confined to the Western Europe, basically and Western Europe is going down the drain, and you can see yourself, for example, when you look at the news like this, where that lack of Russian gas can bring German industry to standstill. And hey, this is Mr. Habeck, this philosophy major who runs German economy into the ground together with all those fanatics. So even he has to admit that Germany will have to scale back or even shut down its industrial capacity if the deliveries of Russian natural gas through Ukraine stop next year. Well, they will stop, but the point is that actually when you look at Mr. Macron and Germany, they begin to feel something. Some people in Russia speculate that he's trying to jump on the on the ladder of the last departing basically rail car, but some people say not without basically justification that being a Rothschild creature, he works for Rothschild's family, he used to be there basically paper boy if you wish, well still is, that they try to figure out what is going on. And let me explain something for you. If we consider this theory, which not necessarily all of it, but part of it could be true. What many people do not understand still, they do not understand the metaphysical scale of the change in the world today. It's, again, when we say, many of us say that it is historically unprecedented, it's like half millennium event. The question why Western civilization goes down, and it goes down, in fact it accelerates, is the fact that many people think that money means everything. They don't. And when you have your money, even very large amounts of them, and you cannot buy anything for those money, guess what? What's the worth of those money? And then there is another thing, of course, for the large capitals, like of this Rothschild family, or whoever does those capital accumulation. You know what? There is an interesting dichotomy here, because if you have so much money, you become a slave to them, and you need to constantly worry what to do with it. And Macron, in this particular case, if we consider that he's a Rothschild creature, which he is to a large degree, Rothschilds are desperate now They have some people who obviously can count and see where it is all going. They need to park their capitals somewhere. Well, guess what? Economically, look at what BRICS is. Russia will be voting Egypt actually on this meeting for getting full membership. You have Saudi Arabia coming in, and you have like 30 other countries lining up, including from Africa, which, by the way, by the words of the President of Kenya 2 days ago stated, yeah, we're done with the US dollar. Guess what we have in this particular case? You have the countries which are not only the majority of population, you have the countries which own majority of the world resources. And that explains everything you need to know, because West is doomed. Europe is basically barren land. There's very little in terms of resources and energy there, and even when this even moron Habik has to admit it, I mean, Russians have the ability to basically kill economy of France and Germany if they wanted to. Russians are generous people, usually, and sympathetic ones. They don't want German children or German people starve to death. No, but they will keep it as long, so much as to not to create some kind of the rise of the yet another fascism or Nazism in Germany. But Russia is not responsible for providing the prosperity for Germany. They already bid farewell to it by their policies, and Russians don't care about, anymore about those, German cars, German alleged standard of living, which, by the way, Russians are getting to live much better than Germans. And the same goes for France. I mean, yeah, Paris stinks with urine and rats, and so what have you. This is civilization in decline. And then suddenly, if you are a Rothschild guy, what do you need? Well, maybe Macron wants to spy on this meeting, but you have to keep in mind that the fact is there will be enough leakers, so to speak, from attending people who will leak the information there anyway. But the point is, look at the agenda of this meeting of BRICS and what stands as number one point on this agenda. This is a catastrophe which is going towards both United States and Western Europe. It's the BRICS making an agreement on the common BRICS currency. And when your currency is supported by Russia's massive military might and economy, and then you have and the resources, and then you have this colossus of the economy of China, huge Indian economy supporting it, and then you have now Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all those important countries, just let alone Iran. And my God, what do you have? You have a real reserve currency supported by the tangible things, not this BS which is burning now in industrial quantities on the battlefields in Ukraine. All this NATO, toys, and now they try to make all those moves to show that they matter. They don't. And here comes the other thing which I wanted to talk about, and that actually explains why Macron wants to do something about it. France already lost it. We need to admit it. But here it is. Mr. Belousov, the genius, economic genius, and one of the fundamental brains behind Russia's economic resurgence. He, speaking yesterday, actually made a very interesting admission, but this is admission which I'm making for a long time now myself. And he was quoted under the very provocative headline, for example, like this: the first vice premier of Russia refused to consider West as the enemy. Well, actually, it's not what he was stating, and immediately underlined in red is this: the first vice premier Belousov, Russia may become the storage, the century of the values of the Western civilization. And he's talking, of course, a classic Western civilization. He is not talking, and actually he makes the point, that modern West is not the West, because the real Western value is Christianity. And no matter what we say, and Russia is multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, overwhelming majority of its population are Christians or grown up with the Christian root. And for example, that's what I was trying to say all the time. I'm a profoundly Western man, not modern Western man. Again, I do not support pretty much anything in the modern Western cultural agenda, but I support, obviously, the Western civilization as such, which gave us Shakespeare, which gave us Mozart. You know, in Russians are actually heirs to it. And when you look at this and say, yeah, that's what he stated, and I was on record. You can look up my blog, and that's why I like internet. It maintains all those records. Read, you will find it. Early from the start of the Ukrainian conflict in 2014, 2015, I already stated Russia is the West now. And normal people in the West, and there are still significant numbers of them, they look at Russia right now. That's the only chance for them to survive as people, not betraying their essentially Christian values, which are conservative values. Conservative not in American sense, but conservative in the Christian sense, which are family, heterosexual relations, kindness, and things of this nature. Sympathy to people. That's what matters, and we have a long way to go there until we, can say with the full confidence that, yeah, finally this is how it completely emerged, but it is emerging. Again, as I already stated, you wouldn't believe the numbers of the Western Europeans who are applying today for Russian citizenship. You could be surprised. And I'm talking about even Americans. You can easily find it all over the internet. And that's what Mr. Belousov meant when he spoke about it. The West, which Russia is preserving right now, is not Russia's enemy. Of course, how can Charles Dickens be my enemy? How Mozart or Bach could be my enemy? How classic Western heritage, how Plato, Aristotle could be my enemies? How the physics and mathematics could be my enemies or enemy of Russian people? Of course not. And that's what he was saying. But the West, as we know it today, it's in a complete decline, and it will implode. Actually, it is imploding now, and special military operation was designed from the outset. Today we can summarize the strategy of Russia to do what Russia is doing and wait for the results. So, this is what I wanted to tell you today, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me, coffee or two. I would really appreciate this. And thank you very much for listening to me, guys. And have the nice rest of the week. And I talk to you later. Bye-bye.